This occurred a bit over a year ago. Me and my girlfriend decided to have a date night on the beach, figuring there'd be less people if we went during the evening hours and it'd be cooler outside. Important to note though, we're both young women, but I in particular have a younger looking face. We came in our bathing suits, found a quiet area away from everyone else, and put down our towels, and we just hung out. It was a super nice time, until a creep approached. A dude approached us from the direction of the general entrance area, and looked to be about his mid-30s. Going to paraphrase, but he said something along the lines of, "Hey, me and my family are new to this area. My wife and my 4-year-old daughter want to sit with someone so we can be less lonely and make some friends. Can we sit with you guys?" Weird vibes immediately. It was like 9:30 p.m. at this point, and we were distant away from everyone else. Who would bring a 4-year-old out to a beach this late? And why would you want to sit with some strangers? And why would a family choose to hang out with some college-aged women? This was clearly some bullcrap. Also, of course, no women or child matching that description in sight. My girlfriend and I politely declined, but he becomes more and more insistent and animated. I started to panic and fumble for my pepper spray in my bag. I was nervous and trying to be discreet, but it took an agonizing amount of time to find it at the bottom of our towels. Somehow he didn't notice, and once I had it clutched, we got a little more bold, trying to let him go. My girlfriend lies and says we're underage, but the guy gets visibly mad and says, "No, you're not." I respond, spray in hand, "Dude, you need to leave." The look he gave us was the scariest thing. He took a step back and looked at both of us like he was sizing us up. Then he goes, "You guys are liars," and wanders away. We watch him. Dude does not return to a wife or kid. Me and my girlfriend got back to our car ASAP and called the police. Sketch vibe was unreal. We gave them his description and took off. As far as we know, nothing came of it. The question we still have is, what was this dude trying to do? He was not under the influence as far as we could tell, and his story seemed so rehearsed. We still theory on what his plan was, and neither of us can reach a conclusion about what could have happened that night. I was living in Tampa, Florida in 2017, right when there was a serial killer announcement. The news reported they caught the guy a few weeks later, but to this day, my gut tells me they got the wrong guy. So here's my story. It was April 20, 2017, so you know what I was doing, and a lot of it. But keep in mind, at this point my life was a constant stone. For 7 years, nothing really affected me the same way. My boyfriend at the time and I agreed to start the night at different friends' houses since his friends didn't smoke while mine did, topped with the fact that I was about to move to a different state, and it would be the last time I would see my friends for a long time. So around 10 or 11 p.m., I would take an Uber to get to his friend's house. The night was highly normal up until this point. So I order the Uber and the Uber driver drops off my friends at their houses along the way. So being the person I am, I strike up a conversation for the 30-minute ride. How are you doing? Are you seeing a lot of people tonight? My normal questions. I hate silence, and this is just who I am as a person. After we get through some small talk, he starts asking me where I was going, and I explain everything. And then he asks why I'm not partying with my boyfriend at the time, and my stupid self explains that I'm not sure if we're going to make it with the move and he doesn't love me anymore. Then he starts asking if my mom knows where I am, if people knew I was coming, and when does my friends we just dropped off expect me home, and do I live with them? Thankfully I caught on that these were weird questions to ask someone who was traveling alone, so I started to lie and say that my mom was expecting me to call as soon as I arrived, and how I was getting texts in the group chat that I was in. Once we arrived, and of course like a horror movie, the other friend's house was in the woods on the edge of Tampa, and my stupid self was in overdriving to figure out how to get out of this one. We can finally see my friend's house and a little bonfire around 300 feet away when he stops and says this is where he will drop me off. I ran out of that car ASAP, and he hightailed out of there right before I closed the door. Thank God I didn't leave anything in that Uber. I know it's not the craziest experience, but my gut is rarely wrong about these kinds of things. I don't know what to think about this. until I saw the news when they announced that they caught the guy. I don't know, but I hope this was worth mentioning. This is something that happened to me a couple years ago, and that it still freaks me out when I think about it. To start with this, it was around midnight and I was in my room browsing stuff on my phone when I suddenly hear what sounds like knocking outside my bedroom window. I first shrugged it off as being a squirrel or something, until I heard the same sounds again, which is when I started to become concerned. It was at this point that I left my room and called my dad to tell him what was happening. He tried to reassure me that it was nothing, and while this was happening, I heard even more knocking coming from the front door. I tried calling out to see if it was my brother or anything, but didn't get any answers. At this point, I was really starting to freak out. It was after this that I heard someone at my back door trying to force the door open, and thankfully after this, my dog finally caught on and started barking like crazy at the other end of the door, which finally drove off whoever was out there. After what happened, I called my grandpa, who lived a block over, to come over and pick me up because I was way too scared staying the night in that house, being home alone. In retrospect, I should have called the police, but I wasn't thinking straight. I was shivering on the couch holding a knife the whole time I was waiting. I still have no idea who was out there that night. I was taking a walk alone in a nature trail earlier that day, and my only working theory is that someone had followed me home. I have no evidence of that though. This was probably the scariest experience I've ever been through, and it still makes it hard for me to stay home alone at night. I'm a young girl living in Iran. Iran's going through a revolution and people have been protesting again for 2 months straight now. People often chat down with the dictator from their windows at night here. Tonight they just stopped, and when I decided to go for a smoke, I went to the main street, which is less than 50 meters away from my home. And to be honest, I was paranoid about it all the time, but everything went perfectly normal, and I turned around to go back home, thinking I'm being too scared these days. Halfway through the alley, I noticed a group of huge men. One of them was holding a speaker that was playing one of the protest songs. 2 of them were shooting laser beams into windows at each side of the alley, and the others had guns. They were Islamic Republic forces baiting people to come out of their windows. I couldn't look at them when they got closer. I just held my breath and walked past them while my heart was about to jump out of my chest. It didn't take more than a minute, and I was only a few meters away from home, yet it felt like forever, and at that instant, I was almost certain I wasn't going to get home. I was terrified and all alone while there were huge men looking for probably the most peaceful protesters while they were walking towards me. I don't know if they really minded me much or not, but regardless, it was absolutely horrifying for me. I moved to the US for a postdoctoral fellowship in Baltimore, Maryland. This is a city where black women regularly disappear, and recently, a serial killer, Joe Metheny, was outed in Baltimore as feeding his victims at a local butcher shop he ran. This happened to me in 2019, and is not related to Joe Metheny, who died in 2017. Compared to my home country, the weather on the US East Coast is hot and muggy, so I used to dip out of the lab to take walks in a nearby park. I did this maybe 50 times, exploring the vast park with its river, its bottom piece and upper trails. It's not too secluded and you can easily spot people jogging, which put me at ease. Nevertheless, it is in Baltimore, and the crime is infamous. I've had several hairy encounters in my time there. Now, one day, I'm sitting at the bottom of the local park taking the sun. It's maybe 4 p.m. and I need to get back to work soon. Suddenly I see a stranger in the distance. This is the first time I see someone jogging down there, as the bottom part is very secluded, but as I described, you can spot joggers along the trail surrounding the bottom part, so it's not too isolated in my opinion. I immediately sense something is very wrong. He's staring at me and not moving, and he starts talking to me. showing me a sort of map he's holding with his right arm extended out towards me. He asks me to come over and show me where we are on the map. I'm frozen and extremely scared. Something about the situation was very off, and I've been all around the world, but this is a first. Something about him is just wrong. I then noticed something truly disturbing. In his other hand, which is elevated, he's holding a very large rock. He keeps telling me to come over and show me something on the map. I freak out because to get away, the only way is to run around him, or run backwards and deeper into the bottom of the park. I shout no, and miraculously, he lowers his arm for a moment, allowing me to run past him. I ran and ran and ran until I was back on campus. I really wanted to call the cops and report this, as I know I became very close to being another statistic in a city where people regularly disappear. But because I was technically supposed to be at work, I never reported this to anyone except my closest friend, who believes I was indeed faced with evil.